Yes, you are now listening to the sounds of Sports Reports as ordered. And those sounds are brought to you by the world famous, world renowned, cool, calm, and collected. He was born in Texas, raised in VA, representing everything New Jerusalem. He is Mr. Logical. Don't bring feelings to a fact fight.
Don't do it.
And then it's I down here in the Alamo, your unorthodox statistician going left so much you thought I was southpaw. I do believe in Joe Hendry. I go by the name of 2-5. So do me a favor out there, y'all. Join us for this SEC preview, the last of our college previews. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do all the good things. And tell Granny we said hi and pass a liquid death while you at it.
Sweet Reaper.
Get it. So, Mr. Logical, so we did the ACC. We did the Big Ten. The other night we did the Big 12. Now it's time to put the cherry on top with the SEC. So, quick few news items real quick. The SEC has decided that starting next season, they will go to 9 conference games. As a part of this agreement, they will have to play at least one other Power 4/Notre Dame school. So this is the problem, right? So the argument has always been the ACC and SEC doesn't play as many conference games as us, but the ACC only got 17 teams, so they still can't play 9 yet. But the SEC is going to have 3 permanent rivals, and then they're going to interchange the other 6 to where, you should see everybody at least every other or every 2 years at your place. And the reason that that's important, Mr. Logical, is because Texas A&M joined the SEC in 2012. Florida has been to Texas A&M 3 times this year, will make 4. Georgia has not been to Texas A&M since Texas A&M joined the SEC. Conversely, Texas A&M went to Lexington, Kentucky back in 2018. Oh, I'm sorry, Kentucky went to A&M back in 2018. A&M's never been to Kentucky since they joined the conference.
Because it's not conducive to the playoff. Like, people trying to make it seem like it's fair and balanced. It's not. It's not like they set it up to where they front load their schedule with you might take a tough road game, neutral site, but it's normally somewhere down south, no further west than Texas. So even if Bama decided to play Oregon on a neutral field, it'd be in Dallas. Right. It wouldn't be in Colorado. It wouldn't be in San Francisco, anything like that. It would be down south. If Georgia wanted to play a neutral game versus Wisconsin, it'd be in Atlanta. So it's like the schedule, like I said, fortune favors the bold. The SEC has been a major pipeline of NFL talent. It's been a major source of entertainment for college football. So they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. The your G5 school, like the Boise State, they've been doing their thing out in Idaho, but they're not going to get the same, leeway as Tennessee, Ole Miss, or South Carolina, one of these other teams from the SEC. It's just the way it is. Like the same way the TV coverage in the NFL, you got to get more Cowboy stuff in between games than you are 49er stuff, even though they're both legacy teams. One team just drives the entertainment market. SEC, because they do produce a lot of quality football, they get a lot more attention and they get a lot more leeway.
Yeah, so then in other news, the Big Ten has won the last 2 national titles, so the SEC stranglehold has been brought to a halt. But what's going on at Auburn? Coach Hugh Freeze on the hot seat, of course, but they have this new philosophy where there's a coach that's going to call the first down plays. There's a coach that's going to call the third down plays. He's going to call the second down plays, but he has obviously he's the head coach, so he can override whatever they choose on first and third down, respectively. What the hell is going on in the Plains?
They're not set up for success. And I think that's because jobs are on the line. And when people's jobs are on the line, they do things out of character. That
That's the
doesn't make any
wildest thing
sense.
I've
I
seen
don't
yet.
think I don't think any level that would make sense. I don't think the youth football league that I volunteer with out here in Jersey, our smallest teams is like the flag football team. I think they're 4 to 6 year olds. That wouldn't work with them. Having multiple people trying to give them directions is definitely not going to work with the 19 to 22-year-olds you have playing at, like I said, that level of football, because the SEC, it means more. That's their slogan, their moniker. It's a lot of pressure in that because they know the Bama game is always on the schedule. The Florida game is going to be tough. The LSU game is going to be tough. You can't lose to Mississippi State. Vanderbilt could be doing things, but you can't lose to them. So every single week, there's immense pressure to win games. And if you have it to where you can't even balance out whose responsibility is to call the plays, as soon as you lose a game, like say you lose a game to Vanderbilt, they're not traditionally a power. They're working on their program. They
Which
get
they
some good
did last
transfers in.
year.
It's like that could take the win completely out of your sails, and now people are getting fired. Guys are getting benched prematurely. It's gonna set off a panic because there's no structure. That's not a structured, solid foundation to start your season with.
Yeah,
I
and they
hope they
come down
change
to
it
these
before the
parts.
season starts.
They're coming down to these parts next week. They come to Waco to play the Baylor Bears. I'm trying to figure out who's going to be their quarterback when the season ends. Jackson Arnold looks like he's going to get the start, but you got Ashton Daniels on the roster. You got the freshman Deuce Knight, who I think might be the best out of the three. But Jackson Arnold has the hype. He replaced Caleb Williams. People have been waiting for them for him to take that leap and become a superstar, and I just don't think he's got it in him. Ooh, down year coming. Stay tuned. So Arkansas, Sam Pittman is on the hot seat. I think Mark Stoops at Kentucky is on the hot seat, but Oklahoma might come open if they don't get it right this year. Brent Venables, they went out and got John Mateer from Washington State, brought his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, with him. So a lot of people have OU as their surprise team. I've seen some brackets with OU in the playoffs. Stay tuned about that, maybe. But the last thing we talked about it the other day, Texas. First time ever, preseason #1 in the AP poll. And whoever I was arguing with on Blue Sky yesterday, yes, they are the most underrated college football team there is. Maybe you could make an argument for Michigan, as far as
Overrated or
historically.
underrated?
Overrated. Overrated
Yeah.
historically. Historically, I'm talking about. But we'll see how the season plays out. So, taking it from the top, Arch Manning at Texas, preseason #1. So as I look at Arch Manning, he's thrown 95 total passes in his career so far. They played against ULM, the University of Louisiana Monroe, for y'all out there that don't follow the Warhawks. And he threw 2 picks against them, 51.7% completion percentage in that game. And I'm just supposed to believe that Arch Manning is going to lead Texas to the promised land, that they are worthy of the #1 pick after everything they lost. Mr. Logical, what am I not seeing?
Well, funny, they opened the season at Columbus against Ohio State, and they're 2 point, like 2.5 point underdogs. But I think that's just because they're playing in Ohio. I think people like the hype. I think the name Arch Manning, it comes with a lot of hype. Like, was it a great strength comes great responsibility or something like that? And I believe that people believe in him. I think that he won't get too far down if he has a bad game. He definitely has 3 quality sources to go to within his family on how to bounce back from a tough loss or how to break down a defense. So I think just from the mental aspect, I think he'll be fine. I think Texas talent will be fine. I just feel like a couple of games are just going to get away from them. Maybe 1 or 2 games, nothing crazy. I don't think it's going to be a bad year. I don't think he's going to go out there and just throw pick after pick after pick because he is a big quarterback. He does have, you could tell he's very bonded in with his teammates. He was taking pictures in the hood, like at barbecues or something like that, like a few weeks ago. So I think he
Arch is invited
understands.
to the cookout?
I don't know about all the invited to cookout stuff. That's not really my lane. I'm just saying that's where he was taking pictures with his
Hey, Quinn got him
squad,
to
gooses up.
back-to-back. Quinn got him to back-to-back semifinals. 25-5 the last 2 years. So I ain't going to bang on Quinn too much.
Like I know I used to bang on Sarkisian pause when he was the Atlanta offensive coordinator, but he seems to find his niche uh in college football and with Texas. Like you talked about, they're an overrated program historically, but also they still will find a way to get the talent. I talked about it ad nauseum, like how great of a football talent the state of Texas is. So I think they'll be fine. I think a couple of games. I think a game, the Ohio State game, because it's on the road. Maybe that's the one that gets away from them, and they start out 0-1. But I think they bounce back, just because that environment. I know Texas is a big environment, but no, Arch didn't play at like one of these top prep schools in Louisiana. Like he didn't play at one of these schools that was playing their home games in the Superdome or anything like that. He played at a really good school, a local school, and then he went to Texas where they were pretty stacked, and he had a guy ahead of him that basically absorbed all the bullets and pressure. Ended up dropped to his 7th round, which is kind of weird. I thought he was a better than a 7th round pick, but we already saw how the draft played out with other quarterbacks on different teams. So I think Texas will be fine. I think they'll have a good year. I don't think they're going to have a down year. I don't think they're going to fall apart. It's going to be, a bump here, and the bump might beat Ohio State. Then they go on a 6 or 7 game tear where they're just basically dominating their opponents.
So I think that Texas, if everything clicks, they could very well win the national title. They got Colin on defense and, Anthony Hill on defense. They're losing a lot of Colin Simmons. They're losing a lot of the secondary, Jade Brown, the Thorpe Award winner, so there's some reasons to be concerned, but I think that the talent still there is good enough. The other night we asked if Dion is a rebuilder or a reloader. Texas is a reloader program. Yeah. So they'll be fine, I believe. CJ Baxter's coming back
every spring. They just reload.
Yeah, CJ Baxter's coming back from injury, and Trey Wisner played well last year in his absence. The question is going to be, what does Texas offensive line look like, and how long does it take Arch to get acclimated? Because like you said, going into the shoe to start out, it's probably a toss-up because Ohio State's starting a new quarterback as well, Julian Sayin, number 2 in his class behind DJ Lagway. So it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a tight game. It's going to be a game that comes down to the margins. But let's just hypothetically say Texas loses that game. You got San Jose State and UTEP, then a bye week. You get Sam Houston State before you go to the Swamp. Now, Florida's one of those teams that they can get anybody and they can lose to anybody. Correct. So last year when when Florida came down to play Texas, Lagway just happened to be hurt, which is going to be Florida's Achilles heel. Can he stay healthy? He's already been in a walking boot this offseason. His best receiver coming off an injury last year has a bad knee in the preseason so far. So we'll have to see how that works. No, I don't think Texas should be worried about Tech because Texas is always going to have the cream of the crop, and Texas got more money than Tech. I don't care what Tech's doing right now. Like the name itself.
Tech can spend a lot of money, but Tech buying 4- and 5-star recruits probably gets them 1 4-star linebacker, 1 4-star wide receiver, 1 5-star safety, 1 5-star edge guy, and then a couple of 3-stars underneath. Whereas Texas has a couple of 4-stars and 5-stars coming in at the same position all over the field, like continually. I think Texas Tech is trying to get there via like paying for it, but it has to work out. So they have to worry about the Big 12 part first. But yeah, I think Texas has just pipelines of money and just pipelines of players coming into their school.
Yeah, and that's not going to go anywhere. You know what I mean? And like for the fact that you have Sarkisian as the head coach there, and you had Quinn Ewers starting ahead of Arch, it just shows you, not saying that Quinn is better per se, but I'm just saying, like, as a recruit, what's waiting for you when you get your turn. Now they're replacing Isaiah Bond, and Matthew Golden, so those receivers gotta catch on with Arch too and get everything clicking.
But Arch has been there 2 years too, so it's like, yeah, he's starting over this year as a starter, and like he is the guy. We had, they had Malik Murphy there last year. He had transferred out in between, or 2 years ago. And he was like, you know what? I saw the writing on the wall. I'm getting up out of here. So there's no one that contend for his position. No one's going to put him on the bench. And like I say, he's got to sit there for 2 years in quarterback rooms, learning the Texas system, aside from all the years he spent learning quarterback stuff from his uncles. So I think he'll be fine. It's just starting out the year in Columbus might just be the game where he goes, 29 for 39, but they still lose 34-31 because Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith, and he just makes the play at the end of the game. You're muted.
They get the Red River over at, up in Dallas after the Florida game, so that's going to be a tough back-to-back, in my opinion. Not saying that they lose a game there, but if they do, that could be a spot. And once they lose that second game, all bets could be off, as far as are they going to make the playoff, and what their season is going to boil down to. So, at the end of the day, Texas's schedule might get them just because of where the games are located. But I think that their schedule is soft enough that we don't have to. We don't have to think of calamity. And before, I get any further into calling their schedule soft, they do go down to Georgia, so, that's waiting on them. And we remember last year when Arch saw a ghost when Georgia came after him. It looked like the Eagles getting after Mahomes, to be honest with you.
Well, good thing for him, he's seen it.
He's seen
so
it.
Like at a minimum,
that was at home.
Yeah, but it does. Listen, the color of the stands and the end zone and the shirts in the crowd. Yes, home field advantage does play a factor into it. But when you're getting your ass kicked by the dudes in the jersey on the field, that's all you can really focus on. So seeing it live, seeing what the speed looks like, because that was that's always a question I remember. Like people asking high school quarterback recruits when they play like the those Army East-West games and the Shrine Bowl games. They're like, what's the difference? And everyone's like, oh, the speed is different. Because when you're in your high school level, it might be one dude on the field that's super fast. But then you go to these high school all-star games, everybody's fast. And I think that game, Arch saw that, oh, these guys are just as big and as physical as the guys on my team. Not many teams match up with Texas across the country as far as physicality and the speed on the outside, and this, like, what Georgia provides as far as speed and physicality, Texas can match. So he can see it in practice, but seeing it when people are actually coming to trying to hit you, it's probably a different thing. So now he has that locked in. I think he'll be fine. I think the rematch, Texas, essentially.
I think Texas will be fine overall. I think their schedule sets up perfectly for them to get to the SEC title game. Because, like I said, they got that OU Florida back-to-back. But then after that, it gets pretty – I don't want to call it easy because it is the SEC. But, they get at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, Vanderbilt at home. They get the bye week before Georgia. They get Arkansas at home, and then they close with A&M at home. So the only thing about that is, regardless of how bad I think Arkansas is going to be, they're going to give Texas everything they want. The only thing that Arkansas hates more than they love themselves is Texas. You know what I mean? That's how you put that one. And, but LSU was getting some hype. Garrett Nussmeier getting Heisman hype. This might be a do-or-die year for Brian Kelly. I don't think he gets fired, but there's been some talk out there that his job could be on the line depending on what LSU does. So the problem that I have with LSU is, can they run the ball? They haven't been able to the last 2 years. He's lost the season opener 3 years in a row, whether that was to UCLA, twice to Florida State, and then They go to Clemson next week. They start their season at the other Death Valley. You know what I mean? It's going to be tough.
It seems like, it's not like a lot of favors in this schedule. Nussmeier, I think there's preseason Heisman hype for him. I think there's preseason Heisman hype for Arch. I think DJ Lagway, the quarterback in Sellers in South Carolina. So I think all of these guys are aware of the hype that's associated with them as individuals and their teams. Also in SEC, I do believe that 10-2, 9-3 will still probably slide you into the playoff based off the committee just making up their own mind. So I think
not only that,
a little off there, but 9-3, I think if you can get 9-3 in your SEC school, you're good to go. Because if you go 10-2, like say Texas, I got them going like 10-2, right? Say LSU goes 11-1 and they play an SEC championship game against South Carolina, who are, we'll get to that. But Texas is just sitting there like, I bet we locked in at 10-2. Whatever happens in this game, they'll slot those guys in. But if you get a fluky 8-4 ACC team playing in the ACC championship against a 10-2 Miami, and they beat Miami, and Miami loses that game, and they're like, both of them not getting in. So that Miami at 10-3 is probably out, and then the ACC winner at 8-4 is probably going to be in. So that's going to slide in a 10-2 Texas who didn't play in their championship game. I think it's all set up for the SEC to get 4 teams. And
I think because of that, I
think that's why teams aren't. I think that's why they like playing these games early. The SEC is the only one of all conferences that plays these kind of like, we'll go to USC, we'll go here, because they know that they're going to get the benefit of the doubt in the polls as the season plays out, just because they went somewhere tough week 1.
Well, that's something that I'm concerned about because, they left out Bama at 9-3 last year. They left out Ole Miss at 9-3 last year. Illinois got left out at 9-3 last year. Indiana in, SMU in, and then neither one of them won a playoff game, didn't look good. So I wonder if we see that again, or if there is a 9-3, LSU, Bama, Georgia, are they going to jump the line this year?
I think we saw it with the TCU. They changed the whole damn college football playoff format after TCU got mollywopped. They're like,
well, that was already in the works anyway, though.
But
don't blame TCU for that.
But TCU wasn't going to get back the next year. They weren't going to get back. We've seen it happen before when they left Bama out and somebody got destroyed, and they were like, we're not doing this again. We'll get both 2 SECs out of the 4, and we'll figure out a way to make it work.
Right.
I think if SMU got destroyed by Clemson, I'm talking 34-14, something like that, I don't think they get in because the committee could, like I said last year, the committee needs a story that they could take to the podium that the audience will believe. They can go to the podium and say, we felt like SMU wouldn't be competitive in the 12-team playoff based on how they performed in the ACC championship game. We think Ole Miss will be it's performed better, or even with Indiana. I think now that Indiana didn't win any playoff games and they looked a little overmatched against the playoff opponents, they're going to look at that. So if you get a 10-2 Kansas State team or 9-3 Ole Miss, they can be like, well, last year we made the mistake of letting in the darling school that everyone loved and thought was on the up, on the rise. Let's stick to the blue blood. And I think the SEC can kind of bank on one of those teams getting that benefit of the doubt, at least one.
So, they call LSU wide receiver U. You know what I mean? And this year ain't going to be any different. They got Nick Anderson coming in from Oklahoma. They got Berrien Brown coming in from Kentucky. Chris Hilton Jr. ready to step up. So, but like I said, it comes back to, can they run the ball? And then defensively, how's the secondary going to look? Ashton Stamps is back there, but they've been very underwhelming and un-LSU like the last few years. Harold Perkins is coming back from injury, so you figure the pass rush will be just fine. Blake Baker came in last year from Missouri as the defensive coordinator and made an immediate impact. LSU was almost LSU again. But I don't know if I trust their defense enough in their running game enough to see them as a serious threat to the national title, even though they got my guy Patrick Payton coming in from FSU. Over in Tuscaloosa, finishing the regular season 9-3 get you fired most years. But it was Kalen DeBoer's first year. It was the year without Nick Saban. They did some great things. They went down to Georgia and won. But then the season didn't end so well. They went to Norman and got bitch slapped. And then they went down to Florida for the bowl game and lost to an undermanned bench playing Michigan team. So the season didn't end on a good note. Now, the good news is Kalen DeBoer went out and got that old thing back. Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator who was in the NFL with the Seahawks after, the year prior, him and Ryan Grubb took Michael Penix in Washington to the national title game. So, Mr. Logical, what's your thoughts on Bama this year?
Bama, if we look at their schedule, starting out early with Florida State and Wisconsin, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri, Tennessee, their schedule looks tougher. And I just want to believe in Bama. I just can't imagine, just because Nick Saban is not there, a lot of the same players are still there. The philosophy is still the same. I just have a feeling that they're going to be able to keep it going. But it is a tough stretch. Like, we're going to do our playoff prediction. I like it. I like to think that they're going to do well. Like 9 wins again, at least, if not 10 wins. I just don't think it's going to be the way the season ended. I don't think it's going to carry over. I mean, like I think the way the season ended, and we talked about it before when they said, "Oh, those guys didn't really want to be there." I really think they thought they had a real shot at getting in the playoff.
They definitely wanted to be there. I mean, they played Michigan, which was the team that knocked them out the playoffs the year before. So I don't want to hear any of that.
Yeah, but that doesn't get you to the next round. I don't really like to subscribe to that form of thinking, but if you know you're going to be a first or second round draft pick, third round draft pick, and you're at Bama, or you're ready to transfer, how much effort are you putting into this bowl game against Michigan that gets you some makeshift trophy?
I mean, that's all fine and dandy if Michigan was playing their starters. Michigan were playing backups too. Like they were missing 20 players. They didn't play none of their running backs. They didn't have any real wide receivers to worry about anyway. So you know what I mean? To lose that game, and Jalen Milroe played. So it's not as if they just walked up in there and was like, hey, you know what? We're going to lay down. They just didn't show up at all because Michigan pushed them around. Just like they did the year prior.
Well, the year prior, at least they had a shot to win if they could have played, a little bit better defense on those little big routes, but that's neither here nor there.
So for me, the tricky part is going to be that game at Missouri. I think Missouri has a high window this year as far as they could be a playoff contender, but that's mostly based on their schedule. I like Missouri's defense a lot. Speaking of defense, Bama's defense is going to be better this year. My guy, Keon Saab, he was the one person on Bama's defense last year that I looked at and was, especially in the secondary, and said, hey, they got a player. But this year, they got another year of experience. So I expect the defense to come out a lot better. Deontay Lawson, at linebacker, next to my guy, I talked about him the other night, left Colorado, Nakai Hill-Green. He jumps off the screen every time I watch him play. So Bama's defense is going to be legit. They're breaking in a new quarterback. Ty Simpson's coming in. But I think Bama might have a top 3 offensive line in the country. Now,
consistently has, right. Like, every year there's a stat for one of the offensive linemen that says something like played 1,056 snaps, hasn't given up a quarterback pressure. There's always like one of those guys on the line that has one of these ridiculous stat lines. And then also they probably run around 330, 335
so they
on
are
average.
It is worth it to note that they are going into Tallahassee next week without their starting running back. Jan Miller broke his collarbone, so it sounds like he might miss the first 2 games of the year. I think they'll be fine, but I'm just saying, they brought in Jeremy Bernard from Miami to go next and across to Ryan Williams, who had that beautiful catch against Georgia that put Georgia out of their misery. So I'm big on Bama this year. More to come. Georgia, the Bulldogs, so Carson Beck out, Gunnar Stockton in. So he didn't have the ideal situation last year. He had to take over, in the second quarter of the SEC championship game, get a few weeks off after that and then prepare for Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame's defense. So it's unfair probably to judge Gunnar Stockton on those 2 games, being that those were his initiations into college football.
Yeah.
But I do wonder how good he can be. They got the weapons. They brought in Zachariah Branch from USC, so they got a weapon now after losing Arian Smith, but leading the nation in drops last year. Nate Frazier is going to step up at running back. I'm not saying he could be a superstar, but he's going to be damn good. They brought in Josh McCray from Illinois to complement him. Now, this is the first time I could remember, especially since Kirby Smart has been the head coach, for me to have questions about Georgia's secondary. KJ Bolden coming in, I'm excited to see him, even though his ass should have been in Tallahassee. I don't like how that went down, but it is what it is. I still want to see him play. But when I look at Georgia, they make me wonder, because I'm looking at the schedule. They're going to start 2-0, Marshall and Austin Peay. Then they take that road trip to Knoxville, get the bye week before Bama. Hey, don't laugh, but hey, Auburn is the key here because they got Georgia and Bama coming in this year. And the last time Georgia and Bama both went there, it took Georgia a late play in the fourth quarter to get out of there, and it took Alabama a 4th and 31. So don't take it for granted.
Yeah, but Auburn always has – it always seems like they're missing a piece to be a well-rounded, consistent team. Like there's always something missing. Either they don't have the playmaker at the quarterback position or defense. There's always something that they're just missing that keeps them away from being 10-2, and they end up being 7-5 or 8-4 out of nowhere. And they do go through coaches a lot too. Like for a team that should be more consistent, they do. Like I said, they're just kind of missing a piece. When you talk about
the biggest buyout ever until Jimbo came along.
So
but
I like Georgia's schedule.
Yeah, I like their schedule too. Besides the, I mean, you figure they're getting Bama at home, so there's at least that. But Kirby Smart has shown that he doesn't beat Bama very often. I got my eye on the cocktail party. I don't care what y'all calling it nowadays. It's still the cocktail party to me. Because last year with Carson Beck, Florida had a 20-6 lead in the third quarter until DJ Lagway got hurt. And then Georgia came back and won because they beat up on the backup. So I'm interested in that. And I mean, I'm going to go on the record right here and right now. And everything created equal and all healthy. I'm taking Florida to win the cocktail party this year. They close out the season with Georgia Tech. It was supposed to be at Bobby Dodd, but much to Mr. Logical's delight, the game will be in the compressor, aka Mercedes-Benz, So
it's a nice stadium. It's a nice stadium, but it's a college football game. If it was a championship, all right, cool. Do the money grab, charge the extra 10 or 15% or 20% per ticket, and have it at NFL Stadium. But if it's a regular season rivalry game, it should be on somebody's home turf. Unless it's like established, with the Red River Shootout where it's in the middle and it's been like that for however it's been. It's this established thing where like that's their tradition. We meet in the middle. But if you don't have that, just doing it randomly, mainly this year, because like I don't think I've really paid attention to it. until this year because you brought up it's like 3 or 4 games like that where I'm just like, but I felt the same way about the NFL, like having division games when these guys are playing in Brazil. Like, no, they need to play at home like that. There should be a home field advantage. It shouldn't be like, oh, we want to put asses and seats and TV and different fans from. But that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about that after we do our previews because I'm gonna feel that same way all year.
Yeah, so speaking of surprise teams, I brought up earlier how a lot of people had Oklahoma as a surprise team. Well, I'm gonna talk about my surprise team now, just in case y'all hadn't noticed. It's Aggies up in here tonight. Texas A&M, Mike Elko, year 2, and that defense buzzsaw time. Now I know they're mixed
because you're giving them money.
I know
you're giving them money and you want a return on your investment.
There you go. But I know they're missing Nick Skirton. I know they're missing the 2 Shamars, Turner and Stewart. But they're getting their running backs back. Reuben Owens, Le'Veon Moss. Year 2 of Marcel Reed as the starting quarterback. Last year he came in. Now he has a full off season to get acclimated to the offense. So I think I like that. You know what I mean? They're bringing in my guy from NC State, KC Concepcion. So if you haven't seen any highlights of him, go watch him. He's electric. So A&M's going to have dynamics that they haven't had in a very long time. They had Evan Stewart, but he was playing for Jimbo Fisher. So there wasn't a whole lot of ingenuity going on there. And so even when I look at A&M's schedule here, right, week 3, they got to go to South Bend. You know what I'm saying? Notre Dame with a new starting quarterback, CJ Carr. Watch out for that. They go to LSU. That's going to be tough. And they go to Texas. Outside of that, I don't see many pitfalls in A&M's schedule. You know what I'm saying? Now, I know if you have a Texas A&M jersey, it probably says 8-4 across the chest because that's what they do. You know what I'm saying? I got A&M in the playoff this year. I'm going to just leave it at that.
I don't. I just have
I know you got another team that I'm about to talk about in a little bit in the playoff that I don't understand, but
they just seem to end up 8-4. We talked about when they were having that battle with Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban and Nick saying, "Hey, Texas A&M bought their team," and they had, I think they had the number 1 or at least the top 3 recruiting class for a couple years in a row under Jimbo Fisher that prompted Saban to go to the boosters like, "Yo, dog, I need some more money because A&M's buying everybody." But neither one of those teams made a splash and ended up firing Jimbo Fisher, and they're still paying him a crazy buyout. So that's what I mean. Is like you have these steps forward, but then you have these steps back, and then you're only making baby step incrementally going forward. I just feel like this is going to be one of those things where you expect them in the playoff, and they're going to end up 8-4.
I'm putting them in the playoff, and before anybody calls me crazy, don't forget they went into that Texas game, and they would have won. They would have been in the SEC title game. So it's not as if they're that far off. Like they did in 8-4, but
that's what I'm saying. Like they're not that far off. But then the follow-up year isn't like they don't go 8-4 then 10-2.
No, that's reserved. No, that's reserved for the team that you put in the playoff. We'll get to them in a minute. That's what we're talking about. You ain't talking about A&M. You talking about them. You know what I'm saying? So the Florida Gators, right? My enemy. My enemy. Sleeper. You know what I'm saying? But, hey, I got to give Florida credit where credit is due. They went through that schedule last year, and they did a lot better than anybody could have imagined, even their own fans. Billy Napier got the extension, but, I don't think he's quite
I had him fired multiple. I had him fired 2 years ago when Utah beat him when he threw the post pass. I had him fired then. Like that was like, okay, you're fired. But they seem to claw back.
And last year I was like, it might happen this year because they got that schedule again. They got the same schedule again, just flip home and away. They opened up with Long Island. So okay, you got your 1-0 start, probably like a 63-7 victory or something. You get USF, watch out. It's at the Swamp, so I'm not gonna pick the upset, but watch out. Then you go to Death Valley. Now it starts to get real. Then the week after, you go to Miami. you're not getting out of that 2-0, and I think you're going to go 0-2.
Yeah, but we don't know the Miami we're gonna get, because if you get the same defense that Cam Ward had to deal with, and you're gonna try to get Carson Beck to throw you out of it, I don't think that's a recipe for success. So I think we got to hold our cards a little bit when it comes to Miami, because it might be one of those Miami teams that's like, hey, you could book yourself for 35 points. And now you just got to get after Carson Beck.
With that being said, to your point, they didn't score that against Miami last year, and that was at the Swamp.
But that was week 1.
I don't care when it was. Miami's defense still wasn't good.
And I don't think they started Lagway. I think they started
they started the old guy, Graham Mertz.
Graham Mertz or something, like Graham Mertz or whatever.
Yeah, it was Mertz.
Yeah. I think the dynamic's completely different with a quarterback that can get on the edge. Like you say, he was no one rate quarterback in his class when he came out. He was part of the reason that, like you talk about that lead they had against Georgia. That was his presence. We've seen for years that the NFL wasn't really drafting a lot of these athletic quarterbacks out of college. But every single year, these college teams that had these quarterbacks that can move and get on the edge and run and create plays were just winning games. Nebraska did it with multiple guys who didn't even get considered to play quarterback in the NFL year after year after year for a couple of decades. So having a guy like DJ Lagway getting on the edge, putting pressure on the defense, he's not a traditional pocket passer, but he can throw. He is a natural playmaker. I like them as my surprise team. That's why I got them going.
As much as I hate the Gators and would love to revel in their misery, who the hell made this schedule, though? So it's not even just the teams that you're playing. It's the order of succession that you're playing these teams. Because like I said, they go to Death Valley in Miami back-to-back. So they get a bye week. You're like, okay, let me wipe my brow. Oh, hell no. You can't wipe your brow because you got Arch coming in the week after the bye. Then you go to A&M. You know what I'm saying? You get your little breather with Mississippi State.
But that's just SEC. Like
that is not just SEC. That is ridiculous. Hey, we just went through these schedules. Where you see that at on LSU schedule? You know what I'm saying? Where you see that at on Texas's schedule?
Well, LSU's playing a big game on the road to start the year off. It's one team is going to get back. One team is going to get that every year. They're going to get it. But as long as you get a couple at home, you should be able to squeeze out 2 in one of the tough 3-game stretch.
Well, Florida still got to go to Ole Miss too. You know what I'm saying?
But that's I think we're always enamored with the names of the SEC. We talked about it before, like how we felt. We talked about how the top 25 shouldn't come out to the first week of October. Get 4 good games, so you get all the way through September. First week of October, the ranking should come out. Because me and you had this conversation probably like 3 years ago. Damn, I've been retired that long. When I first started my job, it's like they'll do the top 25. And Mississippi State might be 2-1, but they'll put them at 17 because they're going to play Bama next week. So then Bama gets another top 25 win. But Houston was playing Cincinnati, and Cincinnati was 3-0, and Houston was 3-0, but Houston was 23, and Cincinnati was like 12. So we always felt like they've always stacked the teams in the SEC that way. And you always
there's 10 of them in the top 25 right now, and we haven't even played a game yet.
That's what I'm. So it's like it's gonna look crazy when we're talking about it in August, but we don't know how the new quarterbacks are gonna really pan out. That's why I picked a lot of returning quarterbacks and a lot of dynamic quarterbacks. Right. I think the only one, like with LSU, I didn't pick Nussmeier just because I'm just not a Brian Kelly guy. I just feel like he sells his team out at the podium too often. I see it on the sideline, the way he reacts to players. I don't like his demeanor.
He always looked like he got mom spaghetti on his shirt.
He just looks like he goes to the podium and he says stuff like, hey, we couldn't complete a pass in the third quarter. I guess that's on me. Like he says stuff
video,
like that.
Right? You remember that video where Manti Te'o was talking about like, we walked up in there and saw those Bama dudes and It's like, yo, it's gonna be a long night. You know what I'm saying? Like your coach ain't supposed to be having you feel like that. Like, I'm not necessarily gonna blame that on Brian Kelly, but I'm just saying, like, the head coach that is going to lead you to victory and to this promised land is not going to have you fearing another team in that way.
Exactly. But
you know what I'm saying?
But you
yeah,
see it's a little different when you got to tackle some of these dudes and they're your size and they play running back and you're a linebacker.
So then you got the team that you're putting in the playoff. I don't want to spoil your bracket, but I saw some bullshit on that too. But the South Carolina Gamecocks. Now, I will say about South Carolina, right? They lost by 2 to Bama last year. They were an onside kick recovery away. They got the 2 pick sixes called back against LSU, which I don't think I've ever seen happen before in the same game for hitting the quarterback on the return. They got talent, but they lost a lot of talent. Saying Kyle Kennard's in the NFL. Nick Imawari is in the NFL. They still got, Dylan Stewart. He's back to wreak havoc on offenses, but does it look the same without Kennard there? He had 11 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks as a true freshman, but I just want to know, Rocket Sanders is gone in the backfield. But if this was NCAA 26, I would agree with you because they still got Nick Harbor.
Yo, they got Nick. Like I said, I went with, like I said, a Mr. Logical. I kind of keep it simple. I was like, okay, who's every year, like South Carolina doesn't fall off. They don't fall apart. Even when they had Spencer Rattler, it didn't look great, but it was like they still were competing. It's just you could tell he might not have been up to par. Like he wasn't as dynamic as you needed him to be. We can see it in the NFL now where he's just a good quarterback. It's probably a career backup. But I like Sellers. I like what he does. I like what they can do offensively. I like the speed. I like the speed size combination. And I think there has to be some turnover in this conference where every year it can't be Georgia, Bama, LSU. Someone has to come up. So, like, I have my 2 surprises being Florida, South Carolina. I think this is the year that the other teams take a step back.
So they're the other ones.
Not a drop off, but like I think this is going to be the year where I think that like something different has to happen.
They're the other ones that have the Florida schedule. You know what I'm saying? They do open up with Virginia Tech. Of course, that's neutral site. Yeah. But they go to Mizzou this year, but then there comes that middle of the season where they go at LSU, OU at home, Bama
I think
at home.
OU is going to be just as poor as they were last year.
Yeah, but LSU and Bama ain't. Then they go to Ole Miss, and they still got to go to Texas A&M after that. So to your point, Residente, I think South Carolina is close to figuring it out. I just think they're going to get swallowed by the schedule. And on top of that, and this is just one of these 2-5 moments, where did Shane Beamer daddy coach at?
Virginia Tech, baby.
I think it's coming open this year. You know what I mean? And if Brent Venables,
if you're listen, I love my home state. I love my home state, but I'm not leaving South Carolina to go to Virginia.
So the only thing that saves that, in my opinion, is the fact that the ACC schools probably can't pay what the SEC schools can to their coaches. But if we're just thinking about everything being equal, if Brent Venables don't get it right, I wouldn't be shocked to see Shane Beamer get a call from OU. And I don't think you turn down OU to stay at South Carolina.
I think you turn down OU. Absolutely.
I've been watching college football too long for that to be true.
Listen, I'm turning down OU to stay at South Carolina because
you are a liar.
Oh, absolutely not. Listen, I do Oklahoma. If they don't get the best players out of Texas, what are they? They're 5-7.
The only reason you're turning down Oklahoma for South Carolina is because it's closer to Jersey.
I mean, listen.
Don't come here and lie on these airwaves.
I've been to South Carolina and I've been to Oklahoma. If I had to choose a place to live to do any job, it's going to be South Carolina. On top of the fact, if I'm going to coach a college football team, I'm not going to Oklahoma. Look at Mike Gundy. You think he's having a ball in Stillwater? It's not.
That's Oklahoma State. We're talking about the big boy.
But wait, it used to be the big boy when recruiting and you could centralize your recruiting, and you can sell location. You can sell, like, listen, you're a Texas kid. Texas didn't want you. Don't you want to come up here and play for Oklahoma and beat Texas? You could do that. But now I'm a Texas quarterback, but Ohio State's going to cut me $1.5 million to come be the backup. I'm going to go do that. There's nothing that Oklahoma really offers you football-wise. South Carolina, like I said, just look at the talent. Just throw a rock. Throw a rock north.
We'll revisit
throw
that
a rock west. Throw a rock south. And you're gonna find a handful of high school powerhouse teams that you can recruit. You're not getting that in Oklahoma. And
we'll revisit that. We'll revisit that when Lador Sellers is playing on Sundays. We'll come back to that one. You know what I mean? Then
DJ Lagway is playing in South Carolina. Listen, the check gonna find it. The check gonna find a bank account of somebody that can continue whatever they're gonna build based off of this year. I
don't think that's how that works.
My preseason prediction.
So you got OU. I talked about John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle coming in to save the day, to save the offense. Oklahoma's receivers last year, their top 4 receivers played a total of 24 snaps last year. They went out and got Jaden Ott from Cal. He was one of those the whole room of running backs left. He chose to go to Oklahoma. Mateer threw for 3,100 yards last year, ran for another 1,000. Deion Burks, a lot of potential there at receiver. But the thing is, Oklahoma's defense is where it's at. That's going to keep them in games. If you don't believe me, ask Kalen DeBoer about them. So I got them just outside. I don't think they quite get to the playoff, but if you looked up and told me that OU was in the playoff, I would not be that surprised. I might be taken aback, but I wouldn't be that surprised. And, of course, week 2, they got the Wolverines coming in, so that's going to be a big one before they get Auburn.
I would be the most surprised person on earth if Oklahoma sniffed the playoffs.
You are a liar.
Okay, check it out. Where do we get? So playoff, we're banking 9 wins. SEC school, right?
Okay.
All right. I give you Illinois State. Then they got week 2 versus Michigan. I give you Temple. So I give you 2-1. 2-1 after September 13th.
Yep.
Auburn
win.
3-1. Kent State, I'll give you 4-1. Betts, I give you 4-1. Texas lost. South Carolina lost. Ole Miss
a rivalry
lost.
game.
Tennessee lost. Alabama lost. Missouri lost. LSU lost.
Slow down, sir. People don't come into Norman like that and walk up out of there without scars and blood on them. So I don't know about all that. Like, I could see them.
Well, Tennessee's on the road. Alabama's on the road.
Yeah, they lose. I think they lose to Bama for sure.
Tennessee.
They beat Tennessee, I think. LSU maybe, depending on where Brian Kelly has them at that point in the season. If they already got 2 or 3 losses, LSU might be checked out like you were talking about in the bowl game. At South Carolina is going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But I don't know if South Carolina is going to repeat what they did last year.
I got 3 losses by October 18th at a minimum.
I don't know. So
that means they would have to play perfect from October 25th.
I think that they're undefeated. I think they're undefeated going into the Texas game. And
you got them undefeated. I got them with. I got Michigan. I got a loss in Michigan.
No, you don't.
I got a loss in Michigan. Yeah.
Are you buying the Bryce Underwood hype?
I just figured by then, if he doesn't have the passing game figured out, they just gonna put in a bunch of run pass options for him, and they just gonna do how they did Ohio State last year, where they just dominated the line of scrimmage, run the ball.
I think you're Mateer defense. Like OU might have had the second or third best defense in the SEC last year, and they're going to be just as good this year.
We'll agree to disagree, but
we will because we got to move on. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, saying had the best team of his tenure last year. You know what I'm saying? It was supposed to be that moment last year. You know, Ole Miss has never played in the SEC title game since it's existed 33 years.
Yeah,
Never.
that continues.
I think that continues, but I do like Austin Simmons because he's the anti-Arch Manning because he came into the game against Georgia, and you know what he did? He led a touchdown drive. You know what I'm saying? And Ole Miss just happened to beat Georgia down in that game 38-10. So that was the reason everybody said, oh, I'm in on Ole Miss. They're going to make the playoff. But then Ole Miss lost that game to Kentucky at home that they shouldn't have lost. They lost at the Swamp in that game that they shouldn't have lost. So looking at their schedule this year, I expect them to be 4-0 going into the LSU game. They got it at home, but I'm going to go with LSU until further notice. They pick up the win against Wazoo, and then I think Georgia is going to lay the jackhammer on them. You know what I mean? Down in between the hedges. You know, then you got the toss-up with Oklahoma. You know, they beat South Carolina 27-3 last year, and they get them at home this year. The Gators should be beat up nice and well by then. So Ole Miss, I think, has a 10-2 ceiling, but they're one of those teams that fall into the I got to see it to believe it category.
Yeah,
so
they're
I
the
just
team
can't
that
go there.
lose at home to Kentucky for no reason.
Yeah, so I just can't go there. So, but I think Austin Simmons is going to be great. You know, they lost Walter Nolan off the defense, but people still expect the defense to be good. So we'll see.
Austin Simmons, he graduated high school at like 16 or something, right? Like
yeah, he's still super young. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know what I'm saying? So they got a few years out of him unless somebody comes calling. But Mizzou bringing in Bo Pribula from Penn State. You know, he was the backup that led the victory against Wisconsin. But what Missouri does not have is Luther Burden. You know, they don't have Theo Weiss. So who's he going to throw the ball to? The good news is he's a running quarterback. So you add Ahmad Brady, you know, who was on the all-freshman team for the Sun Belt last year at Louisiana Monroe, that same team that gave Arch problems, by the way. So I think Missouri has a schedule here that they, and just for their status, that they could only dream of. You know what I mean? Like they're not, they got the South Carolina game. You know, they get, you know, that's going to be tough. They get the bye before Bama, but it's at home. We don't know what Auburn's going to be at that time of year when they get Auburn. So as long as they don't slip up against Vanderbilt, they go into those last 4 games, I think, with a chance to get to the SEC championship game. You know,
I think it's weird that their quarterback is going to wear 21, but they said Sam Horn and Pribula are going to play game 1. I always said if you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one.
No, they'll be fine. They're going to win that game 78-6. So, you know, both quarterbacks were going to play anyway.
Yeah, but if both quarterbacks are going to play and they're going to play well, then what do you do next week when it comes to Kansas, Missouri? Do you do the same thing? Do you play both guys, or do you just make a decision? Do you just pull the trigger on like, okay, you're going to be the guy?
Make a decision at that point. Like you just have to, you know. But I mean, it's not like Kansas's defense is going to put up much resistance anyway. So, you know, I think Missouri has a 10-2 ceiling as well. I don't think they get there, but if you were going to have a schedule that would set up for you to shock everybody, this is probably the schedule, you know, when you're looking at it. As far as they still play the tough teams, but when you look at the home and away splits, you know what I mean? I think you feel good if you're Missouri.
Yeah, you got UMass at home. You have Louisiana. Like you said, Central Arkansas. Like, so it is set up for them to
go on a run.
They're going to be, theoretically, say they get through Kansas. So they're 3-0 until they lose to South Carolina. Then they're 4-1.
They could literally be 7-1 and finish 8-4. They could be that type of team.
Yeah, but their schedule is definitely a lot lax. There's no Georgia on it. I don't see LSU on it.
Yeah, they close with Arkansas.
They could be the team that knocks out my Florida surprise, because I think their schedule kind of lays out to where if you get through Bama and South Carolina and you only have 2 losses starting October 18th.
If that happens, they're going to the playoff unless they lose at OU.
But you got Texas A&M after that. So if
I'm
you
sorry.
figure,
The OU game is at home. Never mind. The OU game.
yeah.
I'm looking at the
So
wrong schedule, I
if
think.
you could get
No, they are
to,
at OU. Okay.
if you could start out 1, 2, 3, 4-2, the second loss being that game October 11th to Bama. You got Auburn, Vandy, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma and Arkansas to they could be the team that, like you said, that 10-2 ceiling could really lock in because I think they could go on a run.
They could be the 9-3 team that we argue about this offseason about should they have been in the playoff or not.
Because they're lost, because they might have that Texas A&M loss and Alabama loss and South Carolina loss. And it's like,
yeah, and we're gonna look at it like, these teams like SMU or whoever it might be, Louisville, whoever it might be, didn't play the schedule. You know what I mean? So that I think that could be true. But I don't believe that's true about the Vols. Tennessee is coming into this year. They haven't won at the Swamp since right after 9/11. You know what I mean? So there's that to start off with. Joey Aguilar, I think that Nico's a better quarterback, but I think that Joey Aguilar does fit this system Josh Heupel likes to run. Definitely better than Joe Milton did. But the problem with him is he just turns the ball over too damn much. You know what I mean? So that's where I think Tennessee's going to get into trouble. But I think that their defense is going to be legit. They held their opponents to 16 points a game last year. They're getting Boo Carter, back as well. They got Jamard McCoy coming back off the ACL, so we'll see how long it takes him to shore up the secondary. But I think Tennessee's defense is going to be good enough to keep them in these games. Like, I think they're going to give Georgia a battle early, because Gunnar Stockton's still going to be trying to figure it out. But, hey, while we're talking about that, they haven't beat Georgia since Josh Dobbs threw a Hail Mary to Cedric Tillman.
That was a crazy game.
That was a crazy game, but that was also
AJ
a very
Green
long
caught
time
on the
ago.
other end. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
So I'm not all the way in on Tennessee. I'm looking at a 7-5 team in my estimation.
Yeah, Tennessee feels more 7-5 on a regular basis than they should. I know, once again, the same thing. The coach, the temperament of the coach just seems to just kind of sway a little too much. I need you to be a little bit more even-keeled, unless you're winning a lot. Like, if you're winning a lot, you can kind of be as demonstrative as you want. But I just need a little bit more confidence out of the coach. I don't get that much.
I mean, to be fair,
they did. The Nico situation over this offseason, I think that really does mess up the flow. I think it messes up the flow for the guys who were there as well, because you need incentives. No matter what job you do, no matter how old you are, no matter what the profession is, you need incentives. And if you look around and you see someone you deem as a top performer or someone you felt like probably should have gotten the nod, or someone who shouldn't have gotten the nod, get a nod, and the person who should have got one didn't get one, that affects you, especially when you start out 2-2.
Hey, to be fair though,
it's gonna be a lot of like, you know what, I'm up out of here, because it was like the red shirt transfer. That was it 3 weeks into the season, or 4 weeks after the fourth game. You can say, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to transfer portal. I mean, if the vibes aren't right in the locker room, it can be tough.
I mean, hey, to be fair, though, I mean, they did make the playoff last year. You know what I mean? They do have something that not a lot of SEC teams have in the last 10 years, which is a win over Bama, even though you always talk about how the kicker false started and everything.
The kicker definitely false started.
But Auburn, we already talked about in depth. I'm not going to get too much into them. But I will say, once they find the quarterback, they should click, because they might have a I'll call it top 7 wide receiver duo in the country. Cam Coleman killed it as a freshman last year. They're bringing in Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech. So if they can find the quarterback, Auburn could be cooking, but Arkansas ain't cooking nothing. Arkansas is in the fridge on ice. The eggs are cracked, saying there's mold building up. Sam Pittman, I think, is gone after this year. Taylor Green came in from Boise. They did well last year, but remember, they lost to that 3-9 Oklahoma State team. They did beat Tennessee, though, to, back to your point. Last year, they lost 30 players in the transfer portal. This year, they lost 40. You know what I'm saying? So, but my question,
A handful of them went to Ole Miss because I was looking through the
yeah, they
players.
did
There's a
do
lot
that.
of dudes wearing Arkansas gear in their pictures that went to
So my
Ole Miss.
question about Arkansas is more or less, why can't, because Arkansas was always a football school. You know, back when Nixon was president, them in Texas were battling it out. And why can't they get the investment that John Calipari got? Is it the coach? Because, you know, you got Tyson's Chicken and Walmart giving Cal all the money, bending over and saying, go get us a national title. Football team, maybe they're just waiting to fire Pittman. It'll be hilarious if they fire Pittman and hire Petrino. He's already the offensive coordinator.
No, that would be wonderful.
Especially after his history there.
I don't think the boosters are gonna pull out their checkbooks of doing electronic funds transfers for Petrino hire. They're gonna need to get like a Dan Lanning out of Oregon to like really turn it around. Like I said, I have zero clue if he would ever leave Oregon, but they would need something like that. They would need, you know, Penn State to not have a great season and Franklin is available. I think the boosters would get on that. Like I think the boosters would get on maybe even a guy like Brian Kelly. I think they might look at Brian Kelly. You know, I think he might be able to turn it around. Let's break off a few million. But if they feel like the coaches are making the moves that they need, they're like, why am I going to pay for this?
Right.
They'll throw the little dinners on their yachts and anything else, and all their little country club parties, but that's about it.
Yeah, and you know, and just for the record, you know, they are 1-13 in their last 14 against Texas A&M. You know, so there's that. And they always, it's so crazy. Like growing up as a Florida State fan, watching all the wide rights, it's so crazy watching the different ways that Arkansas finds to lose to Texas A&M. You know what's crazy about that streak that I just said is that they're 1-13 in their last 14, right?
Yeah.
So the all-time lead in the series is Arkansas +6. So A&M just crawled back into this thing over those 14 years.
They used to be good. We remember the Darren McFadden years and the Felix Jones years and the Matt Jones years.
Yeah, you know, because when I look at Arkansas, you know, like, you know, they got at Ole Miss in week 3, you know, so they're starting out. But then that next week, watch out for Memphis. Watch out for Memphis. I told you to watch out for them against Florida State last year. Watch out for Memphis. Then they play Notre Dame the week after that. At least that one's at home. You know, they get A&M, then they play Auburn, and then they close the season at LSU, at Texas, Missouri. So if Sam Pittman
is there, Missouri's probably, like I said, they're coming into that game thinking this win gets us in the playoffs, so you're going to get their best shot. So
yeah, if Sam Pittman is there past that road trip to Tennessee, I'd be very surprised. Very surprised. Kentucky, they're bringing in old man Zach Calzada. I remember years ago, he was Jimbo's quarterback in that thriller 8:00 game at night, 41-38 victory over Alabama. And then it was like, oh, Zach Calzada, he's the new kid on the block. Yeah, he went to Auburn after that. Didn't work out. He came down here to the University of the Incarnate Word. Shout out Cardinals. And now he's on his way to Kentucky. And just to sum Kentucky up, Mr. Logical, that game against Georgia last year.
Yes.
Where they were down, I believe it was 10-9, or they were up 10-9. The score was somewhere in that range. And Mark Stoops punted from his own 42 on a 4th and 2. And, of course, Georgia ended up winning the game. They lost the receivers, Dane Key and Barry and Brown. They're rebuilding their offensive line. So here's my quick take on that. If Kirk Ferentz finally hangs it up, Mark Stoops might be the head coach at Iowa next year. You know, he went to Iowa. It's home, you know, the alma mater. You know, he might look at that. But also, the other part of that is you were talking about Kenny Dillingham the other night, Arizona State's coach, and how he handles things. We got to remember, before last season, Mark Stoops had that Texas A&M job until the boosters came through and said, no, we're not paying for him. And then he ended up back at Kentucky. So there could be some kind of funky dynamic there. Just saying. You know, then you got our guy, Diego Pavia. the Alabama state champion, right? He beat Auburn on the plains with New Mexico State 2 years ago. Last year, he went into Auburn with Vanderbilt and won. And then not only that, they knocked off Bama last year, put up 40 on them. So what do you do for encore? You got
That's a
7
strange
starters.
game. I think they had the ball for like 18 minutes or something.
Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah. So they got 7 starters coming back on defense. 12 total as far as people that actually played a lot of snaps last year. Their head coach Clark Lee, he was the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame before he came to Vanderbilt. He took over defensive calling last year, and their points per game given up went down by 12.8 points. So, the problem with Vanderbilt is they don't have a lot of dynamics. They have Eli Stowers. They have a nice running back, but they just don't have that game breaker, turn 3 yards into 8 or something along those lines. They don't have that. So it's a lot of relying on turnover margins and a lot of
everything has to go right for them to get their 24 to 30 points. Yeah.
But I think they're going to be good this year. You know what I mean? They get Virginia Tech at Blacksburg. Don't forget they beat Virginia Tech last year. They get South Carolina the week after that. So that's an L. But then they're on cruise. So they could go into that Bama game 4-1. You know what I mean? Now, I think Bama's going to slap them around, especially going off of last year. But then they got LSU and Mizzou and at Texas back-to-back. It's going to get a little rough. So I think 7-5 is a success for Vanderbilt this year.
Yeah, I think they Pavia was quoted, they have national championship aspirations. They feel like they have a national championship level roster.
He was playing NCAA 26.
Practically, it just I don't think it applies to reality. I love the confidence, but it's just like you said, they don't have the pieces that in you're down 20-6 third quarter, this group on the field offensively, defensively makes the play that turns the tide. Like they're down 20-6, they're probably going to lose that game because they just don't have. You need somewhere game breakers somewhere. We talked about Georgia's defense last year against Texas in that game. Georgia had playmakers defensively that made life hell for the Texas quarterbacks, where even if they couldn't move the ball on Georgia for a couple of drives and maybe they punt or maybe like an ill-timed turnover, the defense can go out there and force a quick 3-and-out or get a turnover right back and maybe turn that turnover into points because they're that dynamic. Vanderbilt doesn't have that. So like you said, they got to get that fumble early. They got to turn that into points. They can't miss field goals. Like they can't give up the big play. Like they can't, come back on the field. 10-3 defense goes back on the field, and then they give up a 60-yard bomb, and that was 17-3 because it just your team, the talent on your team doesn't match that kind of a deficit.
Yeah, but for the record, I do got them closing out the season with a victory at Tennessee. And then finally, Mississippi State. They got to be a little bit better because they can't be that bad. They went winless in the SEC last year. The University of Dak Prescott, y'all. So Jeff Lebby is in year 2. Blake Shapen is back. He got hurt last year in the offense, just went in the tank. They gave up 38 points a game in the SEC against SEC opponents last year. So they got a chance to not make any noise, but early season, they got a chance to show us that they're better because they get Arizona State early. They get Arizona State really, really early, week 2. You know what I mean? They get Tennessee, and I've heard people say Tennessee better watch out. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but I don't think they go winless in the SEC again. I just don't know who they're going to beat.
I mean, I think you got a shot against Arkansas.
It gets rough.
Yeah, I'm like as far as like the way, like I said, the way we've kind of divvied out the wins and losses, it looks like Arkansas might be their shot. Maybe a rivalry energy boost against Ole Miss. I mean, it's unlikely, but these games do happen. Like there's like our predictions are probably so far off that it's like ridiculous. It's going to be one of these teams that we got going 7-5 can go 10-2 and play an SEC championship game. And I got Florida in the playoff, and they could go 5-7. So it's like,
ain't that crazy that Mississippi State has played in the SEC title game and Ole Miss hasn't?
It's strange considering like the coach that they have and the talent that they get. A lot of talented players. I mean, but they had DK Metcalf and AJ Brown on the team at the same time and didn't make the SEC championship game. And it's like AJ Brown is out here making the Eagles wide receiver core look like the Avengers.
They couldn't even win with Jim Kelly's nephew.
Yeah, that dude is a.
I just wanted to get that off.
His life was in spirals. I remember he was fighting in a high school game.
Yeah. I just wanted to get that off. But you know what I'm saying? Yeah. If Blake Shapen can't get the job done, then they got my guy that should still be at Florida State, Luke Kromenhoek, because you know Mike Norvell waited until week 12 or something to play him regularly. So, you know, Mississippi State does have some talent. You know, they're bringing in Jalen Smith, that linebacker from Tennessee. They got Devon Booth and all name world. This is the all name right here. Fluff Bothwell. You know, they got him coming in from Southern Alabama, 832 yards last season, 7.2 yards per carry. So, Mr. Logical, just to put the bow on it, what is your SEC championship game? Who is the winner?
I got Florida versus South Carolina. South Carolina wins the SEC.
Who and who?
South Carolina's winning the SEC. I'm
going No, forget that.
Against Florida.
Who and who?
Listen, I'm riding with this surprise. Because first of all, if it does happen, we could go back to this August 22nd episode and say, see, hey, I told you so. And if it doesn't happen, we'd be like, you know what, man, I went out on a limb.
Well, I hope you went to FanDuel or something and put something on it.
I will.
You know what I'm saying? Because that's nuts. But I got Bama over Texas in my SEC title game. You know, I don't think Georgia's quite there. You know, I got to see more from their offense before I can buy in. And like I said, this is the first time I've really ever questioned their secondary. So I don't have them there. A&M's my surprise team. But, you know what I mean, just short. You know, as always, just not 8-4 this time. You know, Mizzou has the schedule. You know, but I'm going with year 2, Kalen DeBoer with Ryan Grubb back. Alabama's defense rises back up, and I think they beat Arch in the SEC title game. So there you go. So now it's playoff time. You know what I mean? We got the playoff brackets that we got to get to here. So let's see if we can get this going here. Mr. Logical's going to start us off with his playoff picks.
Once again, is always pretty. It's a guess. All right, let's.
All right. So here's our bracket here. You know, bracket provided by the great folks over at sportsbookreview.com. Shouting them out.
My number 9 didn't save. Wait.
Okay.
It did. Yeah, mine didn't save. So take mine down. Like I think I made some edits and they didn't change on the back end. But like I had. So I'll just run it down. I got SMU, Texas, the 12-5 game. I got Texas 5 because Florida loses the SEC championship game but still gets in. I got Florida at 9, Oregon at 8, Notre Dame, Georgia, Ohio State, Bama. I just think the SEC and the Big Ten are going to get a bunch of teams in, and everybody else is going to get trickled in. I don't think the G5 is going to get a school in. I don't think a Boise State, because someone's got to go undefeated to get in. I got Utah winning the Big 12. I got Penn State winning the Big 10. Like I said, I got South Carolina winning the SEC, Clemson winning the ACC. I got Utah beating Texas in the second round.
Oh, okay.
Penn State beating Oregon. South Carolina beating Georgia. Clemson beating Ohio State. Got Utah versus Penn State. Penn State beats them. South Carolina versus Clemson rivalry. I like it. Then I got national championship game, Penn State versus South Carolina. And Penn State wins the national championship game.
So let me ask you a question.
That's what I'm going with.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And I mean this with all due respect. You do know we talking about football and we ain't doing March Madness, right?
Listen,
what you
get it.
got going on in that head of yours?
Listen, I think that we talked about
I agree, James. I
teams
agree.
losing players, transfer portal, sustainability. I just feel like I like teams that return top quarterbacks, head coaches that aren't on the hot seat. I like the talent that you're gonna get out of you. I just feel like this is like the time where everybody else is changing a lot of pieces aside from LSU, but I just don't believe in Brian Kelly. I'm just not a Brian Kelly guy. I just don't have a lot of faith in him coaching a team to success. So bringing back Nuts Fireworks. I like Texas, but I think there's going to be a stumble because Arch he didn't start tough games. So a couple of these games is gonna be a learning process where you're gonna lose a game here, lose a game there.
But watch out, 2026.
I think that keeps them 10-2, but Texas preseason number 1, I don't think they fall that far, even with a couple losses, and they still get into the playoff. I like the way that Florida ended their season. Like I said, they're bringing back the coach got extended. They're bringing back their quarterback. I just think the value of the quarterback in college football, especially when they are dynamic as these guys are that I'm picking to advance, I think that outweighs like how good your defense is. Bama's defense is really good, but Pavia running around on them, put up 40 points. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. So look, the last 2 years, I got the national champion right preseason. I don't feel confident at all this year. Like there's just so much going on because I wanted to go chalk initially. My national when I first thought about it a couple of weeks ago, I was like Penn State, Clemson, man. They just both of them bring back so much. You know what I mean? Like Clemson has the coach, the championship pedigree. They've been there. He knows what it takes to finish off a season. With Penn State, they just got so much. And I just don't believe in their coach in big games per se. But I really like their offensive coordinator. And then they went out and got Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator. So, like, Penn State, I think, is different this year, right? So that you picked them to win the national title.
Correct.
I did not. But let's walk this through. All right. So let me see. Let me get rid of my banner here because we can't see my bottom team there. There we go. So this is what I got it looking like. So, I got Penn State, of course, winning the Big Ten. We talked about that. I got Bama winning the SEC. So I think the Big Ten and SEC champion are going to be 1-2 no matter what, just based off of the conferences that they play in. I think that, Clemson's going to be 3, just based off of, I think they're going to get name respect. Saying there is a chance that they lose 2 games. You know what I mean? But I think they're going to get name respect. Texas is going to get respect just off of Arch. I'm going to put K-State at the 5 seed as the Big 12 champion, even though in real life, they might drop K-State just because they're the Big 12 champ. I got Georgia at 6. Miami should take the ACC, but they won't. Miami should have took the ACC at least 4 or 5 times since they've been in the ACC, the All Canes Conference, right? Yep. Notre Dame at 7, and so on and so forth. Y'all can read the rest of the bracket. So, I got my surprise teams in there. I got A&M getting in. I got Washington getting in. I thought about putting Boise in there as the G5, but I wanted to switch it up. I thought about UNLV, Dan Mullen out there now, but then I was like, is he really going to start Alex Orji? Is he going to start Anthony Calandria? So, like, I'm out. You know what I mean? The only other G5 team I considered will actually make you laugh a little bit, Mr. Logical. I actually considered James Madison because I think James Madison has a chance to go undefeated this year. I just don't know if the Sun Belt gets that type of respect.
Yeah, I think them being undefeated, I think they'll give them a really, really nice December 27th bowl game.
I think Liberty's going to go undefeated. But for the third year in a row,
28th.
But for the third year in a row, Liberty doesn't play a Power 5 team or Power 4 team in the regular season. So even if you go undefeated, nobody respects that.
Yeah, you play the Meineke Car Care Bowl.
Yeah, so as I look at this, so I got K-State advancing to play Texas. K-State usually plays well against Texas, but not this year. I think Texas's defense is going to get pressure on Avery Johnson, force a bunch of mistakes, but I got A&M winning my surprise bowl, against Washington, even though I talked about Weapon X, a couple of weeks ago. I got Louisville going to the ACC championship game. So I got them beating Clemson in the regular season. But then I got Clemson winning the ACC championship game in the rematch. So, Louisville ain't matching up with Georgia. I don't care. Like Gunnar Stockton, I know I said what I said. But by the end of the season, Kirby will have the defense on par. Ohio State over Notre Dame, which gives me the matchup in round 2. Ohio State and Bama. I'm going with Bama. Ryan Day, he clicked his heels. The fairy tale is over.
So
Georgia and Clemson.
80 and 80 was it 88 and 11? And he's gonna be fired.
Yeah. Georgia and Clemson, saying I'm here for it. Penn State over A&M. And then the next round, this is where it gets a little tough because I looked at Texas over Penn State. I thought about it, but then I was like, I would just be contradicting myself. I would just be picking something just to pick it because fuck Texas. I'm not buying the hype. They're going to get into the playoffs and everything. And that dude I was arguing with on Blue Sky, you'll be able to tell me Texas got in the semifinals 3 years in a row. And I'm going to be like, yup, and they still ain't win shit. Bama, Georgia rematch. Georgia gets them the first time between the hedges. Bama gets them back. I got Bama over Penn State as James Franklin is visibly seen shitting down the side of his leg in the fourth quarter of that national title game.
You have a lot of I didn't see this. You sent it to me and I emailed it back to you. I didn't see Bama being your national champion. It just didn't seem like it fit what you kind of value with these other teams. I just feel like they have just as many holes as any other like top program. So I just didn't see them.
I don't think they do. The only thing,
iron it all out.
The only thing that I think would stop Bama, like as far as even just getting to the playoff, is the new quarterback. That would be the only thing. You know what I mean? But I'm trusting Kellen DeBoer. You know what I mean? Nobody had really heard of Michael Penix before Kellen DeBoer got a hold of him. He's a winner wherever he goes. His career record is something like 93-10 or something like that. He got Washington to the national title game. So I just trust the coach more than anything. And he, like I say, he got Ryan Grubb back, and they just have that dynamic
that kind of chemistry.
Yeah, that synergy, if you will. Penn State is more like they just bring back
they just
much.
Have it. They just have so much.
Yeah, it's
on
hard
that football
to pick
team.
Them.
Yeah,
which is the same argument. So dynamic. Clemson has that same argument. You know what I mean? With they're bringing so much back.
But we seen Clemson last year get dominated by Georgia
because Clemson dominated by Louisville on their field, and I do have Clemson beating LSU next week, but I got Clemson losing to Georgia Tech on a Friday night. You know what I mean? And and Louisville might get them again because Louisville just punked them around. That was not your typical upset of, hey, this team just played well and everything went right. Louisville punked them all around Death Valley. You know what I mean? Death Valley came to life, if you will. Tulane, I'm a little, with my G5, I'm a little bit iffy about somewhat.
They just got to go undefeated. And that's the only thing. That's the disadvantage for G5. They have to go undefeated. They got the
schedule because they play Duke, and they play Ole Miss. So they open the season with Northwestern. So
they can't lose either one. They can't lose to Duke and they can't lose to Ole Miss.
So if they can split Duke and Ole Miss, which I think they can, you know what I mean? Then I think they can get 11-1 because I'm not sure with Boise because Boise's got to go to Notre Dame this year. You know what I mean? Like I think UNLV might give Boise a run for their money, but then UNLV's got Alex Orji, so I can't say so much positive about them. You know what I mean? Ohio. So Oregon, I don't have in the playoffs just because I think that Dante Moore is going to be a really good quarterback. I just don't think it's going to be this year. So
I just
A&M,
think the Oregon system just makes good quarterbacks.
A&M, like
I
I
think
said,
just the way they play, just it. I mean, Joey Harrington was a Heisman Trophy finalist in that Oregon offense. That same style that's never with Chip Kelly's gone and all the other coaches that have been through Oregon, the same playing style. Get on the edge, be fast, beat teams up the seam. Like they've always seemed to have the same draw plays, just a lot of speed, undersized guys with speed. And I think that's what Oregon's done for so long. Big quarterback, undersized skill players. Go.
yeah, and I will say that if Oregon does make the playoff this year and make a little run, say they get to the semis, Will Stein is getting a job, their offensive coordinator. He's getting a job somewhere. And I think Kotelnicki over at Penn
Now,
State, the offensive
he should
coordinator.
take the Oklahoma job.
I
I
think
know Oregon might be not the same way, but it's like
nah. I think
you like when you're a coordinator for a top program, then yeah, the Oklahoma job is like, okay, this is like the next step up. But when you are an SEC coach with established recruiting circles, like I thought Lincoln Riley staying in Oklahoma made the most sense because I felt like he had that program to where it was he could retool every year. He was recruiting Arizona, he was recruiting Texas, he got fucking Caleb Williams from DC. So I think he was doing a great job of recruiting. He just needed to get the defense a little better.
I
But when
think
he
that
went to LA, I was like, okay, now this is going to be a black hole for a while, especially when they brought in Venables and he wasn't an offensive guy.
no, but I think that's the thing. I think Venables is the problem. So I think OU is going to try to go after if they do end up firing him.
Get
I
an
think they're going to
offensive
try to.
guy.
No, I think they're going to try to get an established dude. You know what I mean? I don't think they're going to go coordinator. I think they're going to try to pick somebody's head coach.
Pull somebody's head coach.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Like from Penn State, like a guy from like Tulsa or something like that, or they're going to try to get
like just
like Arizona State's head coach.
Yeah, I mean, it ain't going to be him.
Like something like that. But like,
level,
yeah, okay.
I can see them doing something like that. You know what I mean? But yeah, so I got Bama over Penn State. Like I said, I got the last two. I picked Michigan. I picked Ohio State preseason, but I'm not so confident about this one because I think there's just so much up in the air. Like all these teams have questions. Like if nothing else, I knew Ohio State was probably more talented than everybody else. I knew that Michigan's defense was going to carry the water, and JJ McCarthy just had to not mess it up. This year, I'm just like literally like a lot of people are picking Penn State, so I didn't want to fall into that trap of like.
I've been seeing it like everywhere, like like I've been just seeing it everywhere. Like I went to the gym. Apparently, Penn State has a satellite class. You can take Penn State classes here on McGuire. I've been getting a lot of Penn State like videos and stuff like that. And it's been for like the last week, and I hadn't been seeing them before. I was getting a lot of Cleveland Browns and who else? I get a lot of Commanders videos, like my algorithm, some Falcon stuff. But like for like the last week, probably since Sunday, I've been getting Penn State stuff every single day. And like I said, when I walked into the gym, it was a big Penn State sign. And then like somebody I was talking to had a Penn State hoodie on. Like it just was literally everywhere.
Oh, so you've been programmed. You know what I'm saying?
Like literally, I was at work. Someone came down the stairs and I was looking and they had like Penn State hoodie on. So I was like, what?
All I gotta say,
the year.
All I gotta say is, if Kirby Smart wins a national title with this Georgia team, we gotta have a Kirby Smart, Urban Meyer conversation.
Nah, man, not touching Urban Meyer.
I think we gotta have that conversation if he wins with this.
No one's touching Urban Meyer.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, there's some people touching Urban Meyer.
It's Nick Saban.
I mean, in nightclubs, in bars and whatnot,
Listen, the man, he's just trying to give a nice little friendly,
That kicker from Jacksonville needs to go touch Urban Meyer. After Urban Meyer was picking him in the hat, he need to go see Urban Meyer and touch him.
Urban Meyer, NFL, yuck, terrible. College,
yeah. Speaking of the NFL,
top notch.
Speaking of the
Oklahoma
NFL,
should call him, see how his health is going.
Speaking of the NFL, we will be back on Tuesday as it's time to start talking AFC. So we're going to start it off with the AFC East. Take it to the South, go north, and finish in the West. So this has been Sports Reports Exhorted. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for the engagement. Thanks for rocking with us. We appreciate you. Biggest movement since Dipset. Thank you, Grandma. We'll be back Tuesday. We got Farmageddon tomorrow. K-State over Iowa State. Kansas and Fresno State. Hawaii still favored over Stanford. We love y'all. Like, review, subscribe, share, rate, do all the free things. Do all the good things. Don't forget your Liquid Death. That ain't free unless you want me to get it for you.
Sweet
I will.
Reaper, holla.
I will.
We got people.